Hey everybody, it's Cameron here from I'm Not Crazy, the podcast that takes the strange and the unexplainable and breaks it down in a fun and interesting way for you. Cameron here with my co-host,
Nicole DeAnda.
Nicole's taking the lead this week. She was interested in the Russian mystery of Dyatlov Pass, so...
I'm a little nervous.
It's fine. It'll be fun. We're just hanging out, so take it away.
Okay, so you know a little bit more about the Dyatlov Pass than I did initially.
I have seen quite a few documentaries on the subject.
Okay, what do you remember?
Okay, so the Dyatlov Pass mystery, it's a group of hikers from Russia. They were going through a hike pass, which I believe means Dyatlov Pass, I think, translate into like Death Mountain or Don't Go There, something very ominous.
Wrong.
Okay, we'll find out. Then these hikers mysteriously disappeared. They didn't show up to their next location. And then their bodies were found months later, and there were very weird circumstances. They were missing body parts, missing clothing. Some had other people's clothing.
Right.
Their tent was torn up from the inside out.
Yep.
And they had radiation poisoning, and their skin turned yellow.
Okay, cool. So you know a lot about this.
I know a decent amount, but doesn't that all sound crazy, folks? We're about to break it down.
It sounds weird. I took a deep dive into this while I was at work, which you shouldn't do that, folks. But basically, Dyatlov comes from the main guy who did the expedition. So that's where the name Dyatlov.
I believe he was the expedition guide and one of the friends.
Yeah, he was like one of the main people. And also, just to preface, I am going to butcher a lot of these Russian names, so please don't come after me.
She showed me a glimpse of them, and they seem impossible.
They're wild.
I mean, I just learned that Russian has a separate alphabet. I'm like 31 years old, so, you know.
You're right. So it's a young man that brought a team of 8 experienced hikers along with him for an adventure. So before he left Dyatlov, he told the sports club, which is where they were last all seen, like the group together, that he and his team would send a telegram as soon as they returned, which was planned no later than February 12th of 1959. But the telegram was never sent, and none of the hikers were never seen again. When their bodies were found, their strange and gruesome injuries left investigators baffled and also repulsed. Some of them were missing eyes. Another was missing her tongue. Many were struck by a force comparable to that of a speeding car, but no one could make sense of it.
Interesting.
But, of course, as the government does, they try to cover it up. So the Soviet government basically closed the case pretty quickly and offered only explanations saying that the hikers died due to hypothermia because they were, quote unquote, inexperienced, and maybe something like an avalanche was at fault. See, that's one that makes this one a little more mysterious, is that the Russian government is so involved in stopping people from looking into this. I feel like it goes for any government. If there's something that's like unexplained, weird, and eyebrow raiser, they're gonna go right for it.
That's
true,
but I feel like the Russian government is known for being tight-lipped and, you know, a big force, and they're all over this one, so it's fun.
I'm going to start from the beginning. So this takes place in 1959. A group was formed for a skiing expedition across the northern Urals in Sversk Oblast, Soviet Union.
Sure.
Again, sorry if I butchered anything. Igor Dyatlov was a 23-year-old radio engineering student at the Oral Polytechnical Institute, and he was the leader who assembled a group of about 9 other students for this trip, most of them who were fellow students and peers at the university.
We're not very outdoorsy, but don't you kind of want to go on some sort of adventure expedition? Kind of like the beginning of Up before everyone died and it got sad, you know?
I would love to. I would like to say that I would be that kind of person, but I think I'm more of a glamper because I've never roughed it in the outdoors.
Well, hopefully,
and I don't like bugs, and I don't like mosquitoes, and
there's a problem with the outdoors.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point of the outdoors, is being one with nature, and I like being in nature, but with the comforts of modern society, you know?
That's a no. Okay, moving on.
Basically, each member of the group was an experienced grade 2 hiker. That's with the ski tour experience.
That is another thing that adds to some of the weird mystery. They all have experience. They aren't just a bunch of randos that got lost up in the woods. They're experienced hikers and skiers.
Right. Upon completing this trip, they would be receiving a grade 3 certification once they return.
Oh, so this was like a merit badge Boy Scouts situation
kind of,
for them?
Yeah.
Oh,
so that makes it a little bit more interesting. So at the time, the grade 3 was the highest certification available in the Soviet Union. and required candidates to traverse about 190 miles. The route was designed by Dyatlov's group to reach the far northern regions of Savartsk Oblast and the upper streams of the Loza River. So the goal of the expedition was to reach Otorten, a mountain that was about 6.2 miles north of the site where the incident occurred.
What kind of incline are we talking here? What are they working with?
Well, let me get to it. God damn it.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. This route, undertaken in February, was estimated as a Category 3, which is the most difficult one to traverse.
Oh, well, what does it just, which one out of 3? Feels like it should be a 5 or a 10 scale.
Well, this is what my research tells me.
How's it feel to be on the other side, huh?
I feel anxious. My hands are clammy. This isn't great. I'm sweating in a lot of places. The group arrived in a train in Idel, which is a town at the center of the northern province of Savartsky Oblast, so the early morning of January 25th, 1959. They took a truck to Visay. On January 27th of 1959, they began their trek toward Yordia Ortenton. And then on January 28th, one member, Yuri Yudin, he had a bunch of health issues.
The lucky survivor.
So he had a bunch of health issues and he turned back.
I think he was pooping himself. I think it was all digestive, if I'm not mistaken.
No. So he had a knee injury and joint pain that made him unable to continue the hike.
That's not what history remembers.
Well, this is what my research tells me.
It was a knee injury, though? It was a hiking injury? That makes a lot more sense.
Well, it's a knee injury and joint pain, which I have a few images of them prior.
Oh, okay.
Man.
Sorry.
So I have a few images of them prior to taking their expedition where like people took, they took pictures, diaries and all that fun stuff, where he was in crutches at one point. So
that is another fun part of this. They took a lot of pictures along the hike and they even created, I'm sure you'll get to, but like their own newspaper. So there's just a lot
they had like diaries and they had they had photographic proof of
so there's just a lot of documentation.
Which I feel like anyone would do.
Yeah, if you're going on a fun trip. Yeah, and
Yeah.
especially back in the day, just those were your devices to remember. It was diaries and pictures.
The remaining 9 hikers continued to the trek. Diaries and cameras found around their last campsite made it possible to track the group's route up to the day of the incident. So
seems like we'd want a little of the day, but when you never get it.
So on January 31st, 1959, the group arrived at the edge of the highland area and begun to prepare climbing. In a wooded valley, they cached a surplus of food and equipment that would be used for the trip back. The next day, which was February 1st, the hikers started to move through the pass. It seemed that they planned to get over the pass and make camp for the next day on the opposite side. But because of the snowstorm and decreasing visibility, they lost their direction and moved west towards the top of Kailat Sikal.
Okay, so they're just moving a little further up the mountain than they mean. So more wind, worse weather, more exposure.
Yeah. When they realized their mistake, the group decided to set up camp there on the slope of the mountain rather than moving 0.93 miles. So that's less than a mile downhill to a forested area that would have been a great spot, would have given them some shelter from the weather.
Right.
It's speculated that Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude that they had gained.
That makes sense. You don't want to backtrack and do it again.
Or he decided to practice camping on the mountain slope.
Just being a badass, he's like, fuck it, we can do it.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be more inclined to believe that he didn't want to lose the altitude that they gained.
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that.
So, do you want to see the pictures of before they're...
Yeah. You can show us some pictures.
So, based on the images, pretty much everyone in the group between the ages of, as young as 20.
Well, yeah, what was the oldest age here?
38.
And there was a picture of Dyatlov. I did look at the pictures. It is pretty haunting just knowing what happens. Because it's just a bunch of kids documenting a fun hiking trip.
Yeah, it's literally everyone in their, early 20s for the most part. So basically we're at February 12th of 1959 when they were supposed to send their message saying that they made it through their journey. Time has passed. On February 12th, no messages had been received. There was no immediate reaction when they didn't receive a message right away.
There never is. Have you ever heard a story where they do send someone right away on this situation?
Yeah, no. Like I said, there was no immediate reaction because delays of a few days were pretty common with such expeditions.
Yeah, you'd imagine.
Here we go to February 20th. This is when the travelers' relatives and family members
Start to panic,
pressing. Yeah. They demand a rescue operation. The head of the institute sent the first rescue groups, which consisted mostly of, volunteer students and teachers. Later, the army and the police forces became involved.
How much time did it take between kind of help volunteers to actual enforcement?
It seemed like it took less than a week.
Okay. So within a week?
Yeah, I would say within the week, because then it says on February 26th of 1959, the searchers found the group's abandoned and badly damaged tent on Khoilet Sakal. Campsite baffled the search party. It was said that the tent, like you said, was half torn down and covered in snow. It was empty, and all of the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind.
Not what I would have done.
No, not at all. So investigators said that the tent had been cut open from the inside. 9 sets of footprints left by people wearing only socks or a single shoe or even barefoot could be followed, leading down the edge of a nearby wood on the opposite side of the pass, about 0.93 miles to the northeast.
Terrible. I think about this case always when how long could I survive outside with nothing on? Because we'll get to it, but it seems like they make it for a while. But I would just curl up and die instantly. That sort of cold situation and nothing on. God, that'd be terrible.
I think when we went, this is just a side note.
Inside baseball?
No, no. That women's pain tolerance is obviously more. They have a higher pain tolerance compared to men.
Right.
And then when we went to that museum in Missouri, I think it was
into the Titanic Museum where we tried to keep our hands in the water to see.
I kept mine in for a pretty long time.
Yeah, good for you. Is that what you want? You want a pat on the back?
Yeah, give me a high five. Thanks.
That's your pat on the back.
Thanks. So after 1,600 feet, these tracks were covered with snow. At the forest's edge, under a large Siberian pine, the searchers found visible remains of a small fire.
Well, again, how much time had passed again? I feel like everything would be covered in snow because there were storms after them too, and during.
So let's
how
say,
would they find anything?
So let's say about a week's time.
Okay.
Right? Because there was the February 20th was when the relatives were
something's wrong.
Something's going on. I would say the 26th, 27th is when authorities
started
involved.
Getting involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so they found the visible remains of a small fire. So there were found the first 2 bodies, those of Krivanchko and Dorshenko. They were shoeless and dressed only in underwear.
Bummer. That's not how you want to go.
The branches of the tree were broken up to 5 meters high, suggesting that one of the skiers had climbed up to look for something, possibly the camp. Between the pine and the camp, the searchers found about 3 more corpses. Dyatlov, Klomogorova, Slobodin, who died in poses suggesting that they were attempting to return to the tent. So they were found at distances of 980, 1,570, and then 2,070 feet from the tree.
That's pretty far.
That's yeah.
And something that was always really chilling to me is they found skin on the bark, suggesting that maybe whoever was scrambling up that tree was doing something to get out. It was being pursued.
I don't think I found that in my research, to be honest with you.
I think I remember that, but I'm also not the one taking the lead. That might be false. Who knows?
Well, again, I feel like you know a lot more about this than I do.
I watch a lot of movies.
Finding the remaining 4 travelers took more than 2 months.
Oof. It's quite a while.
Finally found on May 4th, under 13 feet of snow in a ravine about 246 feet further into the woods from the pine tree. So it's not that far of a distance between.
No, but during storm conditions on a mountain, you probably very low to no visibility.
I know, but just the fact that
they all died so close to each other.
Yeah. They all passed so close to each other, and the fact that it's just sad that it took them months
to find everyone.
To find the remaining 4. Yeah.
With that much snow, it's crazy that they found them at all, but sorry, grotesque, but they probably helped preserve the body a bit.
Yeah. 3 of the 4 were better dressed than others. There were signs that some clothing of those who had died first had been removed for use by others.
Dubanya,
I know. Dubanya was wearing Krishvenchko's burned, torn trousers.
Krishvenchko.
And her left foot and shin were wrapped in a torn jacket. So a legal investigation started immediately after the first 5 bodies were found. Medical examination found no injuries that may have led to their deaths, and it was concluded that they all had died of hypothermia. Slobodin, who had a small crack in his skull, but it was not thought to be a fatal wound.
Yeah, again, this might be some of the Russian government covering it up, that it's just hypothermia that they died, but it's going to be clear that they're a little more banged up.
These are the 5 bodies at this point. So it's Krishenko, Dorshenko, Dyatlov, Klomogorova, and Slobodin. And then an examination of the 4 bodies found in May shifted the investigation. So 3 of the hikers had fatal injuries. So Thibaut Byglonis had major skull damage, and Dubanya Zorlatov had major chest fractures. According to Boris Zaidadeny, so this is the guy that...
name if that's right.
It's super
Who could
fun
say?
to say. So he's the medical examiner. He said the force required to cause such damage would have been extremely high, comparable that to a car crash. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds associated with bone fractures, as they have been subjected to a high level of pressure.
So they got squeezed to death.
Again, up to interpretation.
It couldn't be consistent with like someone climbing a tree and falling?
They didn't say. They said the
compression. So someone got squeezed to death.
That's what I would think.
Interesting.
Because if you think of the impact of like a car crash, like a fatal car crash.
But they're saying it's not a collision. They're saying it's like a pressure.
Yeah, but it's pressure to the chest. I would think
getting sat on or like just getting crushed.
Yeah, essentially getting crushed.
Ugh.
So all 4 bodies were found at the bottom of the creek in a running stream of water.
Not going to help preserve things.
So they had soft tissue damage to their head and face. So, for example, Dubanya was missing her tongue, her eyes, part of her lips, as well as facial tissues and fragments of skull bone.
Now, one of them had their tongue missing when they were alive. Is that this one? Because they found like blood in her stomach.
Well, I just said Dubanya was missing her tongue, her eyes.
Yeah, but this isn't like a post-mortem, like animal scavenge kind of thing. This is like this happened to her when she was alive.
I will get to the theories.
Okay.
While Zorlatov had his eyeballs missing. So Dubanya was missing her tongue, her eyes, part of her lips, as well as facial tissue and fragments of skull bone. And then Zorlatov was missing his eyeballs. And then Alexander Kolatov was missing his eyebrows, which was weird to me.
Like a waxing or like the skin too? Like someone just came up and like...
I would assume the skin, but I will also show you pictures.
I like to believe that someone just Whoopi Goldberged him quick in the woods. You know, they're camping, they're joshing around.
I will show you some graphic photos.
Post-mortem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you could
decide
make your
for
own.
myself whether or not he's Whoopi.
Yeah. The forensic expert performing the post-mortem examination judged that these injuries happened after death due to the locations of the bottom of the stream.
Oh, okay.
So they think this is an animal.
Okay,
yeah, that's what they're speculating.
I felt like I always remembered hearing that the tongue removal thing was like while she was alive because her stomach had blood in it.
Oh, I don't remember reading any of that.
Okay.
What kind of theories did you find?
I don't know. I've watched a lot of movies, man.
Okay, so now I'm going to show you images of them post-mortem.
Okay, can't wait.
Some of them are in questionable positions. There are little captions too.
Like sprawled out, like, I want you to draw me like this, Jack, wearing only this, that kind of questionable.
Like fetal position, I am
in pain,
I kind of give up on life. Yeah.
Okay, well.
It's not great.
Cool. Well, we'll be right back after this
brief pause.
Okay, those pictures were pretty messed up. Thanks for showing.
You're welcome. I love looking at that stuff as
dead bodies.
Well, it's kind of interesting.
Moving on.
I sound more fucked up than I am. Okay, so I'm gonna go through everyone who was on the expedition.
Okay.
Their age, if they were male or female, and then
age, sex, location. Cool.
ASL. Yeah. So I'm gonna go through that, and then what the medical examiner
put the cause of death as.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we have Igor Dyatlov, who was
Later.
the head honcho. He was 23 years old at the time.
Just a babe.
Obviously a guy. His apparent cause of death is hypothermia.
Okay. That would make sense.
So Yuri Dorshenko, he's 21 years old, a male also. He passed of hypothermia. Ludmila Dubanya, she was 20 years old. She was the youngest female.
Just a babe.
Yep. Internal bleeding from severe chest trauma.
Okay, so she was the one that was crushed?
There were a couple.
Okay. She was one of them that was crushed?
Georgie, he was also known by Yuri, but there's 2 Yuris on here. Krevenchko, he was 23 years old, male also. Cause of death, apparently hypothermia.
Okay. I feel like you're lucky if you die of hypothermia in this.
Not the greatest death, but yeah, better than others.
These ones.
Alexander Kolatov, he was 24 years old, male also, passed of hypothermia. Zdanya Klomogorova, 22 years old, female, hypothermia. Rustam Slobodin, 23 years old, male, passed of hypothermia. Nikolai Thibaut Brigolis, 23 years old, male, fatal skull injury. Simon Zorlatov, 38 years old, so he was the oldest. Male, severe chest trauma also.
Okay, also crushed.
Yuri Yudin, he was 21 years old, male. He's the one that lived because he left early due to his
The lone survivor.
the
boy who
illnesses, like the knee and the joint pain. I mean, if you want to know when he died, he lived a great life and died.
Well, I'm sure he was wrought with guilt and had his own issues, but
I don't think he wrought with guilt. I'm sure he was like, holy shit.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. He died at the age of 75 in 2013.
Good for him.
Yeah. So he lived a life. We're going to get to the
Conspiracy theories?
Yeah.
The conspiracy
So there was initial
theories.
speculation that the indigenous Mansi people, reindeer herders of the local area, had attacked and murdered the group, encroaching upon their lands.
Okay. I have
However-
heard this one before.
However, that was kind of a bust.
I mean, and that also just seems like them shitting on the indigenous people and just kind of, yeah.
I feel like most people,
Cultures and white people just do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So several Menzi were interrogated, of course, but the explanation fizzled quickly. The Menzi people were largely peaceful, and the investigation indicated that the nature of the deaths did not support this hypothesis. Only the hikers' footprints were visible, and they showed no sign of hand-to-hand struggle. Although the temperature was very low, around -13 to -22,
Ugh.
typical winter in Chicago, with a storm blowing, the dead were only partially dressed. Some only had one shoe, while others wore only socks. Some found wrapped in snipes of ripped clothes that seemed to have been cut from those who were already dead, which we mentioned earlier.
So they're leaving the tent in a hurry. Something is either chasing them out. There is some sort of danger in the tent or outside that they had to leave practically naked.
Right. Journalists reporting on the available inquest of files claimed that it states 6 of the group members died of hypothermia, 3 of fatal injuries. There were no indications of other people nearby the Kholat Sakal apart from the 9 travelers.
No people, but what about Sasquatch?
The tent was ripped open from within. The victims had died 6 to 8 hours of their last meal.
Okay, so that was quite a while. So they had probably already eaten and gone to sleep, and this was like a middle of the night situation.
Yeah,
that woke them up.
that's the speculation, yeah. Traces from the camp showed that all group members left the campsite at their own accord on foot.
So no one was dragged out. Everyone ran out.
Exactly. Some levels of radiation were found on one of the victims' clothing.
Now, this is super interesting because I've heard it was multiple of them, and some of them came out yellow and like
I will touch
discolored.
base
Okay.
on that. The forensics stated that the fatal injuries on the 3 bodies could not have been caused by human beings, quote unquote, because the force of the blows had been too strong and no soft tissue.
Like
had
we're
been
talking
damaged.
maybe like a Yeti did this or like an abominable snowman. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I mean, again, up to interpretation. So the release documents contained no information about the condition of the skiers' internal organs.
Okay, they just didn't give us any of that.
They weren't
Suspicious,
really.
So let's
yeah.
say maybe everyone had radiation poisoning or something
It
bad
could
like
be.
that.
It's an
that they're
eyebrow
covering.
raiser. When I read that, I was like, why?
I believe there is I'm sure you'll touch on this, but a military base very nearby.
I will touch base on that.
I figured.
So obviously, as we know, that there were no survivors.
Right. Except for the lone survivor.
Well, he's the one that left even before they.
Yeah, he
were on
didn't
the
go
trip.
through Death Pass.
No. So the theories. So with humans effectively ruled out as the culprits behind the Dyatlov Pass incident, though there are theories that the KGB or murderous prison escapees were at fault.
Okay, I feel like I vaguely heard this one, but I don't remember.
Some began to posit non-human assailants.
Okay, so you're saying Sasquatch.
I'm not saying Sasquatch.
Okay,
I'm
wait,
throwing my
time out.
hands up in the air and just saying non-human assailants.
Hold on a second. So we're just this KGB thing. What's the evidence of that? They just want to kill these kids? Why?
So some began to claim that the hikers were killed by a menk, so kind of a Russian Yeti. So this is touching base on the non-human thing.
Okay, that's one that I put that up as a high contender, honestly.
Yeah. To the account that the immense force and power necessary to cause the injuries of the 3 hikers.
Not to mention, there's pictures of them and in their newspaper clippings. So in the pictures that we see, there is one of a figure walking in the distance, and it's a picture that supposedly that the kids took of a Bigfoot, and in
Oh wait, I think I do have an image of that I show you.
You do have an image of that, and they
It's like a dark shadow, like off in the distance in a wooded area.
Yep, it's kind of hard to see, but also the kids made a.
But I also read somewhere that there was speculation that it was Menzi because there was also markings on the
Yeah, but
tree.
Yeti is Bigfoot. It's their version, but
It's the winter Bigfoot.
Also, it was written though. I can't remember if it was in one of their journals or if it was in the newspaper. Because I guess at the times it was a fun thing for Russian students to do to make mock newspapers about journeys and stuff and vacations. I forget what theirs was called, but They mention in either a journal or in their newspaper thing that it says like, we now know that the snowman lives.
Really?
Yeah. Also, that makes it more weird. I remember the lone survivor said that there was another camera that was missing from the bodies that they would have had on them. So it's likely that the government or someone took one more camera that has more pictures on it.
Oh, probably. Basically, the Yeti was a theory that's popular among those who focused on the damage, specifically to DeAnda's face. While most explain her missing tissue by posting a visit from a small scavenger or perhaps decay resulting from her partial submersion in the watery under snow stream.
Yeah, if your face is half in the water, I don't think that's going to help.
Meg proponents see a little bit more sinister predator at work.
So like a Bigfoot or Yeti?
They're leaning hard into the Yeti.
Yeah, me too. They mention him in their freaking journal in their newspaper, and they took a picture of him. God, go on. Go listen to episode 1. Sorry.
God. Others point to the reports of a small amount of radiation detected on some of the bodies, leading to wild theories that the hikers had been killed by some sort of secret radioactive weapon after stumbling into a secret government testing. Those who favor this idea stress the strange appearance of the bodies at their funerals. The corpses had a slightly orange, withered cast, which is what you mentioned earlier.
And I believe the bodies were also taken out possibly in lead-lined coffins or something, or I think there was something along those lines too. They took precautions removing the bodies for radiation precautions.
But if radiation had been the cause of death, more than modest levels have registered when the bodies were examined. The corpse's orange hue isn't surprising given the frigid conditions in which they were sat in for weeks.
And I know also one of the hikers had also worked on some sort of radiation cleanup. I forget if it was a nuclear power plant, but they were also trying to allude that it was just like radiation that would have been on his clothing, but it was years prior. He shouldn't have had that much exposure anyway.
Right.
And it shouldn't have been the same clothes also. So I think they're just trying to say like, oh, it's still from him just working with the nuclear cleanup from before.
So the secret weapon explanation is also popular because it is partially supported by testimony of another hiking group.
Well, there was like, oh yeah, well there's also...
So like them being on, a testing site basically.
And I think there was like bomb testing in the area too, specifically.
The same night, there was another hiking group that was camping about 50 kilometers from the Dyatlov Pass team. If you would think that like if it was a testing site or radiation, they would also be exposed to it, wouldn't they?
You'd assume.
Okay.
You'd think anything in that area has been pretty fucked.
Right. The other groups spoke of strange orange orbs floating in the sky around Sakal, a site that proposes that this theory may interpret distant explosion.
Oh. Also, could it mean aliens? I know there's a lot of crossover with this one that people are seeing possibly military testing, like flight testing in the area.
Yeah.
Or is it futuristic aerospace stuff, or is it just alien stuff? And is it an abduction kind of science thing that happened to them? Because there were also lots of reports from different hikers I know around the time of different strange lights in the sky, and it's a UFO reporting that coincides with this event.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So the hypothesis goes that the sound of the weapon drove the hikers from their tents in a panic. Half clothed, the first group died of hypothermia while attempting to take shelter from the blast by waiting near a tree line. The second group, having seen the first group freeze, determined to go back for their belongings but fell victim to hypothermia as well. While the third group got caught in a fresh blast further into the forest and died from their injuries.
That could make sense.
It could.
That's, the most like explainable one that isn't supernatural. I mean, it's just their government fucked them and tried to cover it up, which would help explain why they're covering it up. Unless it's too scary for us to realize.
The chief investigator of Dyatlov Pass, Lev Levon, said, "I suspect at the time and am most sure that these bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death."
That could make sense. I mean, if there's something else weird and wiggity going on in the area.
And this is when he was interviewed by a small newspaper in 1990. Censorship and secrecy in the USSR forced him to abandon this line of inquiry.
If you also may remember from our first episode on Bigfoot, orange orbs are also associated with Yeti Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah, that is true.
So could this also just be connected? Is Bigfoot an alien?
You are leaning so hard into this Yeti theory.
Oh God, because they mention it, because there's pictures of it and they talk about knowing now that the Yeti exist.
So another explanation include drug testing that caused violent behavior in the hikers and an unusual weather event known as infrasound.
This one is a very interesting one as well.
So it's caused by particular wind patterns that can lead to panic attacks in humans because of the low frequency sound waves create kind kind of like an earthquake inside of the body, which I thought was crazy.
I mean, it's kind of along the same principles as like hemisync and stuff, and just different sound frequencies having an effect on your brain. And honestly, kind of like that chirping noise that's been like the CIA and has been like used as like a sound thing against our own government, where like just different frequencies can have an effect on your body, and certain low rumbles in nature can cause you to go insane momentarily, essentially. And that's
I do remember.
So
you
this
mentioning
low
that.
sound can essentially cause extreme panic and anxiety. So they might have just momentarily lost their minds because of wind going through the valley on the mountain, is the theory.
In February of 2019, so this is pretty recent, Russian authorities reopened the investigation into the incident, although only 3 possible explanations were considered: an avalanche, a slab avalanche, or a hurricane, dismissing all possibilities of a crime.
I know that avalanche was like the first theory popularized, just because it makes sense that something would, like, that's why they needed to escape and like fight their way out and like claw their way out. But it wouldn't make sense why they left all their stuff behind, why they wouldn't get dressed beforehand, and why they all spread out and had those injuries. I mean,
well, I would think like if I was in a panic, I mean, this is me. If I was in a panic and I heard or knew of an avalanche coming, I would probably grab what I could and just go.
True. I mean, that's true.
I wouldn't think about like, oh, we need to pack up our tent again. You know, we need to.
Well, not so much pack, but I would want to get. I mean, if I was just naked essentially on a mountain, I'd want to at least like reach in and try to get a coat or something.
But
like,
if you don't know how far that avalanche is, are you going to really reach for that stuff? You're going to try to get out of that as fast as you fucking can.
I guess that's true, but it could
that's me just speculating and putting myself in that situation.
Could being smothered by snow attribute some of those crushing injuries we're seeing instead of a
could
Bigfoot?
Be. Yeah.
So maybe it was just an avalanche.
Are you changing your mind on
No,
that?
not at all. It was totally either Bigfoot, like the noise, or like UFOs.
So now we're in July of 2020.
Okay.
Investigators say that the hikers had died of hypothermia after an avalanche of a similar force pushed them out of their tent and into the cold. They're leaning pretty hard into it being a natural disaster. Yeah. Still, the mystery remains unofficially unsolved. The official conclusion is that the group of members had died because of a compelling natural force.
Okay, so either the sound or the avalanche scared them out.
Yeah.
And they tried to get back and died.
Yeah. I mean, the avalanche is not something that I think I could completely rule out, but it would be kind of
easy to patch all up.
Yeah. So what do you think? Are you leaning more towards the avalanche, or are you leaning towards
that's the most
theory?
sensible one, so that would make sense. But there's just so much weird stuff as far as like the radiation and the government's involvement, which does make me believe maybe it's just some sort of like
cover up
weapons testing, and it could be like
I could believe a weapons testing, to be honest with you.
And again, we're having like attacks from other
they're-
governments right now with sound weapons, so maybe it is them just developing something. They accidentally got hit in like a testing zone.
Yeah.
And now they're covering that up.
So you're saying like there was a testing site, let's say it caused said avalanche.
Or not even that. If it's just the sound thing, like it just caused them to go crazy.
To have an internal earthquake.
One of the two. But also, I mean, once again, if you go back, because I know there is like a whole thing in theory on them witnessing Bigfoot in either the newspaper or in the journal, having that image. And that's why a lot of people like that theory, is that the kids kind of lean into it for fun on the trip, at least.
Yeah. Well, I feel like people lean more towards that, like they said in my little notes here. Due to like the injuries that like 3 of the bodies,
the extreme force that couldn't be caused by a human. That's what I like about it. Yeah.
And that concludes Dyatlov Pass.
Well, thanks for listening to Reverse I'm Not Crazy, everybody.
Well, actually, I would like to hear other people's theories too. Like what do they speculate?
And what do you guys think? Is it Bigfoot? Is it aliens? Was it an avalanche? Or is it a weird sound thing? Or was it the Russian government? Or did one of them just go crazy? We'll never know.
No, the Russian government will never let us know.
True. Well, thanks for listening to our take on Dyatlov Pass, everybody. If you like what you heard, make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you rate and review. That'll help a bunch. And we'll check you on the next one.
Ooh, follow our Instagram.
Oh, yeah, follow us on social media, and I'm Not Crazy Pod.
Yep. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.